computer. Recording is now in progress. Okay, so officially now, welcome everybody to the fourth class of this class series on the Heart Sutra. There's going to be 12 in total, so we're about a third of the way. Well, once we finish this class, we'll be a third of the way through. And once we finish this class, and once we have all learned the material that's covered in this class, we'll be able to write the title of the Heart Sutra, the mantra that's associated with the Heart Sutra, and the first two lines of the Heart Sutra. Now, the title and the mantra, in theory at least, contain the essence of the Heart Sutra, but that essence is not really expressed explicitly in the title and in the mantra. It's kind of, it's there. It's more of a, I think it's more of a, is it right brain or left brain? Which is the one that's analytical and verbal? Either way, left. Okay, so that's kind of that's the right brain part. The title and the mantra gets you the feeling, the connection with the Heart Sutra, but it doesn't really express the teaching of the Heart Sutra. But the first two lines of the Heart Sutra, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply, the Prajna Paramita perceives that all five skandhas are empty. That's the teaching of the Heart Sutra. And basically, I mean, so it doesn't stop there; it goes on. There's elaboration from that point, but that's the left brain part of the Heart Sutra, I think. Anyway, so we'll get into it in just a minute, but first, as usual, we'll start with actually reciting the Heart Sutra, which again I recommend as a very helpful aid to writing the Heart Sutra. If you learn the Heart Sutra, or at least begin to learn the Heart Sutra by heart, it will definitely help you in the process of writing out these characters and learning these characters. And so I'm going to share my screen and mute everybody, and then we'll just spend a few minutes reciting the Heart Sutra together. Okay, so now, does anybody have any, questions, anything left over from previous classes or something that you're interested in or want to bring up before we just dive right into the, and which is fine if somebody wants to bring something up now, that's good, or later. All you have to do is raise your hand or unmute yourself and just, blurt something out at any time. Feel free to. Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and start blurting things out myself. Let's see. Where am I? All right, good. You can't see my screen right now, so I'm going to share it again. And we are. Okay, good. And then, okay. So, this is the fourth class, and this class is going to be focused on the first 2 lines of the Heart Sutra, and we've actually done the first 4 characters of the first line. In the last class, we did the first 3 characters, Guan Jia Jie, and we also covered the first character because that's part of the mantra. So these have already been done. For some reason, I'm still including Bo here, but make sure I've got a pointer that people can see. Yeah, okay. So from Sal onwards is what we'll be focusing on this week. But I want to emphasize that by the end of this month, by the end of this class, we will know this whole first line in addition to the title and the mantra, as I said before. And also, just as a reminder, our schedule. Oops, see what I did? Yeah, our schedule is. See, the arrow keys are right next to the control key, and I use the control key to emphasize, and sometimes I miss, and I hit one of the arrow keys, which goes through the slides anyway. So the schedule today is from 3 to 3:35 if you're on the East Coast of the United States. It's the first session, then we'll have a 5-minute break, and then we'll have another 35-minute session until 4:15. Then there'll be a 10-minute break, and we'll have a final session going until 5 for a total of 2 hours. And today is June 3rd. This is the 4th class. I'm starting to cross these off as we go along. Our next meeting will be on July 1st, Saturday, July 1st. All right. So this is the first 2 lines of the Heart Sutra here, which the way one chants it in the Korean tradition, where the Chinese characters are given the Korean pronunciation, we say Guan Jia Jie Bo Sa Heng Shin Banya Bada Milta Shi Jo Gyon On Ge Gong, which is Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the Prajna Paramita, perceives that all 5 skandhas are empty. All right. And down here is a nice picture of a huge statue of Avalokitesvara from a temple in Korea, Huryeongsa Temple. However, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that really correctly, but I like that picture. And so just to kind of further orient us here, the dark green characters, they're bright yellow against a dark green background here on the lines numbered 1 and 2 with the green arrow pointing to it saying we are here. This is what we'll be doing this week. And the yellow characters that come before that, the red characters on a bright yellow background, that's what we've already done. And then the rest is what lies ahead. All right. So what's new in this part of the Heart Sutra that we'll be covering this class? Well, Sal right here is the first new character. So Guan Jia Jie, this is the 3-character word for the Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara that is used in the Heart Sutra. Usually people see the name Xuanzang or Quan Xiyin or Kanzeon. So Quan Xiyin is the Chinese pronunciation, Kwanseom is the Korean pronunciation, and Kanzeon is the Japanese pronunciation. So those are the same. This is a different name, Guan Jiaje. And we talked a little bit about that in the last class, what this means. And, it is kind of an interesting thing to look at, but I'm not going to dwell on it. We've already covered it. The next character after Guan Jiaje, so these two characters here, and we're going to be talking about two character combinations some in this class. But the first character of Bo Sal, this is the two characters that in Chinese mean Bodhisattva. All right, and the second character of that combination is the first new character for this class, the character for Sal. The next character that's new is Heng, and that's the character for practice or practicing. Shim is the third new character for this month, and that's the character for deeply. That's generally translated as deeply, and that's a pretty good literal translation of what this character means. We'll talk more about that later. She is the next new character. All these other the blue characters, as this legend over here tells us, are all old characters that have already been covered. And so we have to go all the way up here into the second line to get to the first new character for this lesson, which is the character for she, which means time or when or while. So in there's different ways of translating this into English in this line, but in the translation that I'm most used to, it says while. So it has a sense of time. We'll talk more about that. Next character, new character, is the character Zhou, which is the character for illumination. This is a character Gyeon, which has already been covered, which is a character for to see or to view. And when you combine these two characters together, they make kind of a special way of seeing something and illuminating it as you're seeing it, and it's usually translated as perceiving, but perceiving in a very kind of cosmic sense. The next character is just the number 5, O, pronounced O in Sino-Korean. The next character is On, which is the Chinese character for skandha, and skandha, which is the 5 skandhas of Buddhism. We'll talk a little bit more about what those are later on. These are later on in the Heart Sutra. We will list these one at a time: form, feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. Ge is a character that means all, and Gong is probably the most famous or even most infamous character in the Heart Sutra. This is the character that means emptiness, or I usually prefer to use the Sanskrit shunyata, and we'll talk more about what the heck does emptiness mean. Now, for each of these characters, we have in one case the character doesn't introduce any new components. The character for the number 5, but all the other characters do introduce new components, and this is how many are contributed by each of those characters. So that brings us up to a total of 9 new characters, which have 20 new components, and there'll be an extra character that I'm gonna throw in at the end to round it up to make a nice round total of 30. Everybody good so far? Oh, yeah, sure, Fatima, go ahead.
Hi there. Yeah, just whilst you're on the topic of introducing the new characters,
Yes.
I'm still sort of thinking about how to find things in my
Yes.
dictionary. If
Yes.
this time, I'm not sure if you could maybe incorporate I've got the Chinese character cognates, how you'd sort of go
Yes.
through and find it in the dictionary. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, okay, we can talk about that. So I've got, do you have that on Kindle? Is that what you have? Or yeah, okay, so I have it on Kindle too, and I can put that on my screen. In fact, what the heck, let's look for one right now. And let's just take the first character. This is an important important thing to be able to do. And I am going to I'm going to keep sharing my screen, but I'm going to show something other than PowerPoint. I'm going to bring up Kindle. No, that's not Kindle. That's VS Code. Okay, here's Kindle. Let's go to my Kindle library, and we're going to look at Chinese character cognates. All right. So I don't know if anybody else here has this book. It's a really nice book. The thing that is it's got 808 common Hanzi, Kanji, and Hanja, which means it shows you the characters as they are used both by Mandarin speakers, by Japanese speakers, and by Korean speakers, who all use Chinese characters. So that's the kind of the great thing about this particular book. Now let's just go. Let's take the very first character that we have for this. Isn't going this probably isn't going to be in there, but I don't know that for a fact because I haven't looked for this one in there. Sal. So let me just tell you something about the character Sal. Sal is only found in Buddhist writings in Chinese. It is the second part of the of the Chinese phrase for Bodhisattva, which is a technical term in Buddhism, and outside of Buddhism, the character Sal just isn't used. So sometimes it's used as part of the Bo Sal. Sometimes it's used on its own as an abbreviation for Bo Sal. But just for laughs, let's see. I mean, there are thousands and tens of thousands of characters that are used in the written Chinese language. This book only has 808, and it isn't a book that is, intended to be used primarily as a resource for studying Buddhism. But let's just see what happens. Probably nothing. Oops, let me see. Let me try it again. And yeah, nothing. No response. Okay, so now hang, on the other hand, hang is a word that people use in ordinary, everyday speech. Mandarin speakers use this character, and there, it's got 33 matches. And so what we want to do is find a kind of the best match. Let's see what this is. This is just kind of in a list of things. Let's see. Oh yeah. So what you want to do is find a page in one of these hits where hang is the first character that's listed on that page. Oh, here it's just, okay, so, yeah, no, that's not very helpful either. Let's see. Yeah. Well, so you get lots of hits, and then you kind of have to look through them. Oh yeah, here we go. All right, finally I found the main entry for this character just by kind of hunting around. And so the search function in Kindle is not very good. When it doesn't show any results, sometimes that doesn't mean anything. Sometimes it's missing. Sometimes the search function just misses things that are there. And when it does show results, it can be hard to sort through the results and figure out, which ones you really need. This is the one that you really want if you're looking up this character, because this is the main heading for that character. And then it gives you a bunch of information. This is the Mandarin pronunciation. This is the Sino-Korean pronunciation. And of course, in Sino-Japanese, I mean, in Japanese, almost inevitably will have multiple pronunciations for any given character. They're called readings. And so this is, anybody here ever study any Japanese? Nope. Yeah, Joe, a little bit. This is what kills you if you try to study Japanese. The Japanese pronunciation is pretty easy. The grammar can be very complicated, but it's not really all that complicated. Um, the kanji, they're called the Chinese characters are called kanji in Japanese. They're used everywhere in the written language. You cannot read or write Japanese without using kanji, and every kanji has multiple meanings, has multiple pronunciations, and how you're supposed to, get all that straight and learn to just sit down and read something without spending like minutes on every single character. I don't know. I don't know how people do it. I've actually tried to learn a little bit of Japanese, um, but you know, anyway. And here's the Japanese is a wonderful language, and I love Japanese people. I'm not I'm not disparaging. Then the language is beautiful and very, very interesting and extremely useful for anybody who's interested in Buddhism. Um, but it's hard, and everybody knows it. Uh, and this is Heng. So He here is a long is a pure vowel E or A, and this funny looking N here is that what we call an NG sound in English. This is a phonetic spelling. And here's the Hangul. So if you know Hangul, you can read the pronunciation from that. If you know hiragana, you can read the pronunciation, these two pronunciations from there. And then, and if you don't know Japanese or Korean or Chinese, a lot of the other, so it gives you some English stuff here, but these entries here are very hard to make out unless you know one of these languages pretty well. These are just two character combinations that the character comes in. So anyway, oops, wait a minute. What did I do? I must have hit, yeah. Anyway, so one character that we looked for, it told us nothing. The other character, it told us a lot, but we had to search for it. A lot of times you can find the characters. Sometimes if you're lucky, let's see, what is it? Oh yeah, so this character is a radical, all right? And so if the character itself is a radical, then it's much more likely to be in this list. Um, there's only like 200 or so radicals in all of the Chinese characters. Most of them are the simpler characters. And a character that is a radical is more likely to be here. So let's go to the next one. I know that this character is also one that is used in common, ordinary, everyday Chinese. When we get to this character in today's lesson, it's actually the title of a popular song. Are there any Savage Gardens fans out there? Savage Gardens, a band from the late 90s. Yeah, Australian band. So they had one of their big hits was Truly Madly Deeply. And so this character appears not once but twice in the title of that song. And so we'll see that later on. But let's see if it's in the Cognate Dictionary. I'm gonna go here, copy and paste it into. Oh, yeah, and so this makes sense. Like I said, the character means deep or deeply. It's interestingly, it's a combination of the radical for or the component for water and the character for far. So something that's far away in the water is deep. And let's see if we can find. I don't really know of a good way other than oh, here it is. So I found. So ideally, what you want to do is find the main heading for that character, and then it gives you the the same information we saw before. It's pronunciation in Mandarin, Japanese, and Korean, and the radical here. The radical for this character is the water radical, plus 11 strokes. So that's what this part. I don't know why they give a separate entry for. It's the same whether you're a Mandarin speaker, Japanese speaker, or a Korean speaker. It's always going to be the radical for water plus 11 additional strokes is what makes up the character. Is this helping you, Fatima, or is this helping anybody? This is,
Yeah, it's quite weird because I've got it up on my phone actually. And the
Yeah,
way they've written 470 is a little bit different to the way I can see it on your screen. There's an extra line in your screen.
really.
Yeah.
Uh, you mean
I
in the
don't,
character in the
maybe,
character itself?
hang on, let's see if I can get that up.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I've got that.
Oh yeah. Okay. So, so the show it again. I want to see that. I want to see that again, please.
It's like you've got a,
It's the font. The font is different. It's the same character with a different font. Yeah. Uh-huh. And it is in fact, I think it's the same number of strokes. The way that the water left radical is written differs a great deal depending upon what the font is being used. And for some reason, in my version of Kindle on my Windows PC is using a funky font that writes it in a way that I really don't like. The way that it's written on your phone, Fatima, is much better. Um, and then the way that, yeah, so I can, let's see if I can make this bigger without screwing up. No, I can't. Oh, I could, let's see. Yeah. So this now makes it more, yeah, now it's going to try to get out of here. Copy and go away. Okay. Um, uh, 70. Here we are. So that's another thing that I plan to talk about as we go along in this course in particular. There are a couple of characters that actually do have a different number of strokes depending upon what font is being used to write them. Um, so and yeah. So, but for the most part, if you're using this dictionary, then just do, unless you find a more efficient way of doing it, which I wouldn't be surprised if there is. Um, there's a lot of the stuff that's associated with this particular book is also online. And so if you Google the either Chinese character cognates and the character that you're looking for, you might find a website that has the same information on it that might be a little bit easier to use or not easier to use. Also, somewhere online, there's actual pronunciations for these characters, which you're supposed to be able to just click on things in the Kindle and it goes to the pronunciation, but that also doesn't work particularly well. Anyway, is that good for now, Fatima? We can come back and revisit this. But I also, just one other thing, as long as I'm kind of broken out of the PowerPoint mode, another really useful thing to do is to copy the character and just put it into a Google search field. And then a lot of times, one of the very top hits that you'll get is a wiktionary.org entry. Wiktionary.org gives you, it is a much easier format than this Kindle format for that book. And oh, and here, see, look, you see that, Fatima? That character that looks like the one that you had in your on your phone, right? Yeah. And one of the really nice things about the Wiktionary entries is it will almost inevitably give you a nice decomposition of the character into its 2 or 3 main components. And then you can, like, if you click on, yeah, I know it's probably a little small, but here's the 2 main components for the character for deep, and it's made up of the character for water. This is the left radical form for water, and this is the character for, oh, so it wants me to go somewhere else. It says this is an alternate form of that character, but it's just a character that means far. So there's multiple forms for some characters, and this is one case in point. Anyway, I'm going to go back into PowerPoint. The current slide. And okay, so actually we're going to take a break in just 3 minutes, but first let's oh yeah, let's look at these are the components. Let's look at the first. I'm going to minimize the squares on my screen. And now we're looking at the first two characters. All right, so this is a very busy slide. The next several slides have a lot of information on them. Each slide will have two main characters, and the main characters will show these numbers next to them. So at this point, we've learned enough characters and are learning even more characters that we've got to have some way of keeping track of them. And so I'm numbering them as they come up in the class. Every character is assigned a number. We've covered 90 characters so far in the first three classes. And so the first character for this class is number 91. All right. Second character in this class is number 92. And then these characters have higher numbers because I'm numbering the main characters first and then their components afterwards. So these are and then the characters that aren't highlighted in yellow and don't have a number on them are characters or components that have already been covered. And so Sol is made up of 4 components, and Heng is made up of 2 components. And on this slide, all the characters and all the components with their pronunciations and their meanings, and the one character that I don't give a meaning for is this Sol character, which really doesn't have a meaning of its own in the Chinese language. It's just a meaning that's just used to be part of the word Bodhisattva. If you had to give it a meaning, you would say it means it's a Chinese transliteration, very kind of approximate transliteration of the Sanskrit word sattva, which is the second part of the Sanskrit word bodhisattva. So the first part of bodhisattva is truncated to just bo, and the second part of bodhisattva is kind of reduced down to just sal when it's pronounced in Sino-Korean. All right. And then the top part of this character up here is the cho. This is the component form of the character for grass. The second character, bu, is a new component. This is like cho. This is a component form. This is not something you ever see on its own as a character, and it means mound. It's very rarely used for its meaning. It's just used as a component in different characters. The next component is san, which actually this is a character in simplified Chinese characters, but in traditional Chinese characters it's considered only a component, so you won't see it on its own. If you ever do see this character on its own, then you know that you're reading simplified Chinese, not traditional Chinese. And sometimes people mix them up together just to make us, just to keep us on our toes. And the fourth component of Sal is Seng. And this is a very, very common character and component, especially if you're reading anything about or by about Buddhism or by a Buddhist. Seng means birth, or life, or born. It gets around a lot. And then these can all be broken down even further into components that have already been covered in the previous classes. And so one of the things that I will be doing in the very near future is putting out a really comprehensive vocabulary list for everything that we've covered and everything up through at least the first 6 months of this class. And so once you get to this point, it actually would be helpful to have the numbers for these so that you can. So in addition to looking characters up in, for example, the Chinese Character Cognate dictionary, you should also be able to look them up in the materials that I provide for you in this class. And so any character that we have covered, you should be able to find it, and the pronunciation and the meaning, and also if it's a component, what characters it's a component of. If it's a compound character with many components, what its components of. Okay, so we should take a break now for 5 minutes. Then we'll come back for our second session after that break, okay? Welcome back. Let's see. What is this here? Oh, yeah, here I am. So we are. Here we are. And then I want to. Okay. All right. So what I want to do with the rest of this class is work through um, the 9 main characters that are introduced in this class, and just make sure. Yeah, good. All right, working through the 9 main characters that are introduced in this class, and as we're going along, we'll see the 20 components, the 20 new components, and a bunch of old components that are found in these classes. But I want to encourage everyone to come back and look at these PowerPoint slides again. After the class is over, you've got a whole month to learn all these characters. You've got a month also to kind of review what we've been over before as well. Review is going to be very important as we go along in this class, and just kind of keeping a clear head and finding your way through all the information that's being presented is pretty important. It's important to realize that basically you're just trying to learn one new character a day, which by itself isn't all that much. But even by this point, we're going from 90 characters to 120 characters in this class. If you look at this slide here, there's all kinds of stuff being thrown at you. It can appear overwhelming, and I'll tell you, it is overwhelming, but it's also completely doable. All right. So again, this is the Sal character for Sal. It's broken into 1, 2, 3, 4 components, 3 of which are new. All right. The Bu component, the San component, and the Seng component. This one is just a component that means mound. Sometimes it means a city. The Chinese characters are like that. They have many different meanings. It's not English words also often end up having like strangely different meanings. This character, I think, almost always refers to birth. This character sometimes refers to birth, sometimes refers more generally to life, and ends up in a lot of combinations with other characters as a component. And then these components have all been covered before, but I put them down here, and it's good to review. So I should say one word about this component right here. This is yet another form of the component or character for person, which is pronounced in Sino-Korean as in. This character does not have a readily available stroke order animation anywhere for it that I've been able to find on the web. So I'm not assigning this as a separate character. You will, if you practice all the characters that we're learning in this class, write this component over and over again. So you get plenty of practice with this. You should just know that whenever you see this little piece as a part of a character, that it means person. It is a alternative form of the component form of person, and we'll see another form of the character for person later on in coming up pretty soon. All right, so the character heng, which means action or practice, actually has 2 parts. If you look at them, these 2 parts are very similar, aren't they? It's a cross character with something on top, and this one is tilted, and this one is straight up and down. They're different characters, or different components. They both mean walk. One of them is pronounced chuk, something like chuk, and the other is pronounced more like choke. They're put together to the character for heng means action or practice. It can also mean to walk. Anyway, so that's the breakdown for these 2 characters. The first 2 characters for this lesson, and so if you look at all this stuff that's on this slide, okay, every new character is highlighted in yellow and has a number. At the first line under the main character is the primary components of that character. One of them will have a blue arrow pointing to it. That's the radical for that character. In the case of Heng itself is a radical. So the radical arrow, the blue arrow, is pointing directly at the character itself, not at one of its components. If there's another level of deconstruction, that is, the main components can be broken down even further, then there'll be another line underneath. In this case, all of those secondary components have already been covered. And in one case, the secondary component can be broken down even further. By this point, we're just having components that are just a single stroke. All right. Here's a nice picture of Samantabhadra. Samantabhadra is the bodhisattva of action, Heng. And Samantabhadra is especially associated with elephants. And in particular, I think the elephants that Samantabhadra is usually read. If you look at this elephant closely, it has 6 tusks, which is kind of interesting. It's unusual for an elephant to have 6 tusks, except in mythology. All right. So, as I said before, this is a little bit of an important topic. Now, this class here that I'm teaching is not a Chinese language class. This isn't to teach you how to speak, read, and write the Chinese language, either modern Chinese or classical literary Chinese. This is for people who want to. Now, you might be interested in that. I think that's a very interesting subject, and this should be helpful to anybody who's interested in learning Chinese. But it's much more focused than that. It's a class in the Heart Sutra, and in particular, the Heart Sutra as it's pronounced by practitioners of Korean Buddhism. But one of the things that comes up is a very basic topic in the Chinese language, which is there are lots of two character combinations in Chinese, and you have to learn to just expect that. A lot of times, if you're trying to figure out what something means in a phrase or a sentence, and you're just doing it one character at a time, you won't be able to get it. You have to realize that one or that 2 or more of the characters in the phrase are actually part of a compound word. And so these are 21 examples of compound words that are found in the Heart Sutra. And there's probably more that I don't have listed here. The first 2 characters in the Heart Sutra, ma, ha. This is not a Chinese word. This is a Chinese transliteration of a Sanskrit word, but it ends up meaning great. Maha means great in Sanskrit, and in Chinese, this ends up being basically a 2-character word. Bo-ji, so this 2-character combination can be pronounced either moji or bodhi, and it means bodhi. This is part of the name of Kwanzaa Bosal in the Heart Sutra, part of the name of Avalokitesvara. This is Ja-je, and this is one of the things that makes this the special name that Avalokitesvara has in the Heart Sutra, makes it a little confusing, or at least open to multiple interpretations, because these 2 characters by themselves are a compound word in Chinese. I'm not going to go through all 21 of these, but I just want to get to the ones that we've already covered up till now. This is Bosal, which I've already talked about a couple of times. This will come up later on in this lesson, Jogyeon, which is a combination of the character for illuminate and the character for to see, which combines means perceive. And then next month, almost right off the bat next month, we will, and I'm going to introduce a little bit about this in this month's class as well. Ilche shows up 2 times in the Heart Sutra. In the Japanese version of the Heart Sutra, it shows up 3 times, and it means all. Okay, so this is just, you might want to refer back to this slide as we continue going through this. This has all of these 2-character combinations, their pronunciation in Sino-Korean, their meaning, and then where you'll find them, either in the title or in the mantra, or what line number they are. And the first occurrence will always be listed first in this list. And I will probably expand this list as we go through. I might find more examples of this. And this is the whole Heart Sutra, and every 2-character combination from the list that I just showed is now highlighted in yellow. Ilche, I said, shows up twice. Here's the second time. And a couple of the other ones have, like, this is, oh no, I can't remember how to pronounce this. This also shows up twice. Oh yeah, and the one shows up 3 times, which is the Bodhi or Moji shows up in the mantra and 2 other places in the Heart Sutra. Okay. Now we go on to the in the blue box on each of these slides where the main characters introduced will show the location in the part of the Heart Sutra that we're doing, or where the 2 characters are that are on the slide. So this first one, the character for deep or deeply, and the character for time or when or while. That's what's on this slide. So this first one is the character for shim, which means deep or deeply. It's broken up into 2 main components, one of which has already been covered, the su, a radical form of the character for water. And this character, shim, also pronounced shim, just like the character that it's a component of. This is pronounced shim, and it means far. And then it has 3 additional components, all of which have already been covered. Myok means lid or cover. In, which is one of the names for this is in or person, and then mok, which means wood or tree. All right, now character number 94 has 2 main components, and this is the character for time or when or while, and it's pronounced she. And so when this is one of the things that I'm going to be mentioning a little later on is where else you might encounter these characters. Since this is the word for time, and since time is one of the things that everybody learns in a first year language class, so anybody who learns Chinese or Japanese is going to learn this character as part of their first year course in Japanese or Chinese, because everybody has to learn how to tell time in a new language when you are, and how to talk about time, yesterday, today, days of the week, months, all that stuff. So time is always a major topic in any language class, and this is the character for time. All right, it's made up of 2 characters. The composition of this character is kind of interesting. Time in Chinese means the temple of the sun. And that isn't really supposed to have any great esoteric meaning, but it's just an interesting way of remembering that the character for time, the sun is always very closely associated with, with our notions of time. We tell time by the sun. We see how the seasons progress by where the sun is in the sky. So the temple of the sun is time in Chinese. And Sa, this is Sa. So if you ever see names of Buddhist temples, they always end in Sa. I once spent 3 months living at Xuanzang in Korea back in the 90s, back when, back when Savage Garden were big in the late 90s. This is Il, which means sun, which is a character that's already been covered. Il is made up of 2 components. The we component, which shows up over and over again. Anytime that you have a box with anything inside of it, it's we. Anytime you have a box which looks almost exactly like this, but doesn't have something in it, it's the character gu, which means mouth. And this is il, the character for one. So sa, the character for temple, has two components. To, which means to work, and wait a minute, is that to work, or is that to for earth? I think that's, I gotta check that out. Might have a mistake on that slide. And this is chon for inch. This is, yeah, this should be earth. I know, Hana's here. That's right, Hana, that's earth, right? To, yeah, right. Okay. It looks kind of like the character for work, which I think was already introduced, but sometimes I get them mixed up. Learning to distinguish characters that look very similar is actually something that I'll also be talking about later on in a later slide. Okay, so trying to advance to the next slide now. Okay, so now we are on the characters for illuminate. This is illuminate or Jo, and this is O, which is the pronunciation for 5 in Sino-Korean. Now, Jo is made up of the character for illuminate is made up of a character for luminous and a character for fire. Okay, so this is also pronounced Jo, and fire is pronounced Hua. And this form of the character for fire, this is a radical form, yeah, here it is, the radical. You can see by the blue arrow. This is a component form. It's just 4 little marks underneath. This is kind of like a little fire under a pot. Okay, is that how you can think of this component form of the character for fire? This, I've drawn a dotted arrow to this. This is the non-component form for the character fire, also pronounced Hua. So you should learn these two together. This is what it looks like when you want to put a fire underneath something. And this is what it looks like when you just have fire as a standalone character, Hua. Now the character for a luminous, Jo, is made up of 2 parts. One is il, or sun, and the other is Jo, also pronounced Jo, which means to summon. This is like a decree or a summons. And they can be broken down even further, but there's only one more new component, and this is the component for knife. If you have I have a knife block, we have a knife block in our kitchen, and it has this character on it because it's from Japan, and so that's a Japanese character, kanji, Chinese character for knife, which is pronounced do. All right, and this is gu. I was just talking about gu. This is a box with nothing in it, so it's gu. Is the component gu. Over here, right next to it, this is another instance of the character we. Now in this font, they've gone out of their way to try to make it so that the we is bigger and wider, and the gu is smaller and narrower. But in practice, you will have a great deal of difficulty distinguishing between these two characters unless one of them has something inside of it, and then you know that it's we. Okay, but on their end, the one thing that kind of makes this not such a confusing thing is that this character, the standalone character for we, which means circle or encircle or surround, is rarely used on its own. Whereas gu, well, gu is used anytime you want to talk about the mouth. There's other characters that mean circle. This is the component form, so usually you only see it when it has something inside of it. So it's usually not that confusing. Anyway, and there's an interesting thing about the character for 5, which is pronounced O. It's made up of 2 components, one of which does not exist. How can that be? Well, we saw some examples of that in the last class. Sometimes, so the radical for this character, if you look it up in a a Chinese dictionary that has that lists things by the radicals, you see that the radical is 2 lines. If you take 2 lines away from this, this is what you end up with. But this character or component doesn't really exist. It's just kind of a I don't know. It's an orphan component that isn't listed in any dictionary. It doesn't have a. In fact, I had to write this by hand here. So there isn't a digitized form of this character anywhere. And if anybody knows about digitizing fonts and so forth, Unicode. Anybody here know when I say the word Unicode, does that mean anything to anyone? UNICODE. So Unicode is the reason why you can now find, why you can copy and paste Chinese characters into a Google search field, because those Chinese characters have been digitized and now exist in a digital format. Why you can copy them, paste them into a Word file or an Excel spreadsheet or anywhere else, because they exist in a digital form. And this does not have a digital form. This can only be written by hand, and it doesn't really exist as a standalone character. It's just what you get when you remove the radical from the character for 5. And I'm sorry if that's a little confusing. I have to tell you, it's very confusing to me, so I'm just sharing my pain with you, okay, as I'm going through, because I think it's really helpful to be able to decompose characters. It helps us to understand how these characters are made, how they're related to each other, what the different parts are. It's very helpful to learn how to write them, because you write them by writing the components one at a time. But sometimes the decomposition just kind of falls apart. And this is one of those places where the decomposition doesn't work very well, because one part of it isn't really doesn't have a separate existence. All right. So now we get to the character on, which means skandha. And so I want to just revisit one reason why I encourage people to learn how to recite the Heart Sutra. If you look at this right here, there's actually Guan, Ja, Je, Bo, Sal, Heng, Shim, Ban, Ya, Ba, Ra, Mil, Ta, Shi, Jo, Gyon, O, On, Ge, Gong. And so when you chant it, every syllable has one beat. There's one exception to that, which is the first syllable of the first line. Is actually, well, the first character of the first line has 2 beats, so it actually has 2 syllables. So when you're chanting it, it goes Gua An Ja Je Bo Sal Hing Shim Ban Ya Ba Da Mil Ta Shi Jo Gyon O On Ge Gong. And when you hear the tape that I play at the beginning and at the end, and I was supposed to play the tape at the beginning of this session, but I forgot. Sometimes I forget. But we'll definitely play it at the end of the 3rd session. There's a moktak that's being played. Moktak means a wooden bell, and so it's just a piece of wood hollowed out that's being struck to keep the time. And so each character has 1 beat in that rhythm, except for the very first one. But if you learn how to chant it, then you can just go through that, and you can say, this is Gua An Ja Je Bo Sal Hing Shim Ban Ya Bara Milta Shi Jo Gyon O On. And then you also know the next 2 are Ge Gong, which we'll get to in just a minute. Okay, so this is on, which means skandha. So the skandhas in Buddhism are the components of the self. They are form, feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. So at either end of the, it starts with form, which is your body, and it ends with consciousness, which is your mind. And the other 3, feelings, perceptions, and impulses, are kind of they're not physical, but they're not conscious thought either. So they are different stages. If you think of the purely physical and the purely mental, the feelings, perceptions, and impulses are kind of in between. Are the links between the purely physical and the purely mental. That's a very crude description of the skandhas. Skandhas is a very kind of deep subject in Buddhist philosophy. Basically, the Buddha, when he was searching for truth before he became enlightened, he was searching for the self, and the thing that he examined to look for the self was the skandhas, and that's why it says in the Heart Sutra that all five skandhas, that the five skandhas are all empty. That was the kind of the big discovery of the Buddha, which is usually expressed as the Buddha's realization of no self, or anatman in Sanskrit. Sorry for the digression on Buddhist philosophy, but just so that we know why this is here. It's a very complicated character, and the top component is pretty simple. It's another example of the character for Cho. What comes under Cho is not a particularly common character. It means hemp. And I have no idea how frequently you would ever encounter this in written Chinese. You don't encounter the word hemp all the time, very often in written English, unless you're reading about farming or fabrics. But on, and this is also pronounced on, just like the character that it's a component of. It's made up of the character for silk, which is sil, and we have seen that before. So it's not in yellow, and it doesn't have a number next to it. But then it's also the character for su, or prisoner. Again, this is another example of the character for we with something inside of it. This time it's a box with a person inside of it, and that's why this is the character for prisoner, su. And then this is a strange character that does show up in a lot of other characters. It means vessel or plate, and in Sino-Korean it's pronounced myung. Okay. So how are we doing on time now? We've got 5 more minutes, so we have to take another break. And we've only got 2 characters left to cover. So these 2 characters together means all empty. And we're going to come back to that and talk about that a little bit more as I go through. This first pass through these characters is mostly just to show you how they're broken down, how they're pronounced, how the characters, how the new components of the characters are pronounced, and what their meanings are. Then I'm going to come back and look at them again and give you a little bit more information, so that hopefully you'll have a better feel for these characters, and not just learning them in a vacuum. This character, let me get my cursor here right. Okay, this is the character for. See, this is wrong. This is a mistake on the slide. There's another character that's pronounced gay that means hindrance. This character means all. It's not, doesn't mean hindrance. In fact, let me correct that in real time, because that's just too egregious of a mistake. Okay, all. It's very important for this part of the Heart Sutra to have that meaning correct there. All right. So this is the character for all, and it goes along with the character for emptiness, or empty, or shunyata, all empty. So gay, or all, is made up of 2 components, both of which are new. One is, this is a funky little character that means to compare. And it's made up of 2 components that are almost exactly the same, that I'm not breaking down any further because it's only got, I think, 5 strokes. And that's be and bake. Bake, this is the component for white. It also means clear. And then its components are all things we've already seen in other characters that have already been introduced. Some have only been introduced just in this lesson. All right. And then the character for gong, or shunyata, or empty, or emptiness. So in everyday, ordinary, spoken Mandarin, this character means sky, or space. And it makes sense that the word for sky or space also means empty. Because especially when you talk about space, space is basically empty. Most of it, not all of it, but almost all of it. So empty space and space are kind of the same thing when you look at this character. Oh, and here's the character for work, which is gong, which I got mixed up with the character for toe or earth. If you take the top part of this character and slide it down, then you get the character for earth. All right, this is a character for whole, which is pronounced hyol in Sino-Korean, and it kind of makes sense that one component of whole or empty or gong or emptiness is a character for whole. And then whole has two parts. Hyol or whole has two parts. One is just a roof, and the other is the these two little legs at the bottom of this character are actually the character for the number 8. And then the character for roof or myeon can be broken down into ju and myok, which means this this little character right here is actually means Lord, and this character here, myok, just means a lid. So this character and this look very similar. There's lots of kind of lid or hat characters and components in Chinese. You'll often see this on its own, but sometimes you put a little dash on top of the hat, and it makes turns it into a roof myeon. Okay, so how are we doing on time now? I think it is time for another break. So we'll take. There's still. I've covered the characters that I really need to cover. I want to go over them again and also ask people if they have questions or things. I want to give more background information on the characters so that you have a better feel for them. But is it okay if we just do a 5-minute break instead of a 10-minute break so that we can have more time to actually cover the material? I don't want to wear anybody out, but I do want to make good use of our time. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break and then come back. Okay. There's actually one more character I want to cover. Let me get to that first and then ask if there's questions or comments at this point. All right. So we've actually covered 29 characters if you count all of the characters and components. Let's see. Oh yeah, but there's one that we haven't covered yet to make 30. This is the kind of extra character that I've added to round it up to 30 for this month. So it's numbered character number 120. And just see if I can get my laser pointer here. There we go. And it's pronounced ip. It means to enter. These are some examples of some interesting places where this character shows up. And this is from the Analects of Confucius. These are a couple of things from Buddhism. One of the interesting things about this character is that it has two strokes, and it's very, very similar. This is the character for enter, pronounced ip. This is the character for pal, which means 8, which we just saw 1 or 2 slides back. If these two legs of this character don't meet, then it makes the character for pal. Here, if they do meet, but they're at least in this font, and you'll see it different ways in different fonts, distinguishing the character for in or person from the character for ip is very tricky. The way that these characters look and the way that you distinguish them will look different depending upon the font, or if you're looking at something that's written by hand, it'll depend on the person's handwriting. If the two legs are completely separate, see in Paul they almost come together. If they're completely separate, then you have the character for this. Sometimes this is pronounced as in for person, because this is actually a variant form of this character right here when it's written as a component. Often it can also be pronounced as for child, as a component form of the character for child. Anyway, let me go back because I actually skipped over one slide. I will now see if there's any questions or comments, anything I went over too fast or that you want me to do again, or anything that someone has that they want to bring up at this point. Or I can just go right on. Now, what I wanted to do here in this slide is to, these are just different English translations of the 2 lines that we just looked at all the characters and components for. One of the really nice things about these 2 lines in Chinese is that the individual meanings of the characters, it makes sense. It isn't always the case in Chinese where you can just look at what the individual meanings of the characters are and figure out what it's saying. Often, the Chinese language has a great love for 2 and 3 and 4 character combinations. This is true for all languages. All languages have strange phrases and idioms that are very difficult for foreigners to understand. Unless you just know that that's what it means. One of my favorite phrases in English is "Bob's your uncle." And a foreigner learning English, if they encounter that phrase, would have no idea what you're talking about. Bob is your uncle. And you say, oh, well, that just means you've got it made. And then what does that mean? Oh, what do you mean you've got it made? I don't know what that means. So it means you're on easy street. Oh, well, what does that mean? You're on easy street. So these are English phrases, but in this particular case, in the Chinese for the Heart Sutra, which is a very poetic, very philosophical, very abstract piece of writing in ancient classical literary Chinese, these 2 lines actually make sense. You can easily translate them into grammatical English, just knowing what the individual characters mean. Quan Jaje, you know that means that's Avalokitesvara. Bosal, that's Bodhisattva. Practice deep, practicing deeply. Prajna Paramita, Banya Bara Milta, that means Prajna Paramita, whatever, I mean, this is assuming that we're not going to go into what does Prajna Paramita mean, but you can put it together to make a grammatical English sentence that makes sense. When perceive 5 skandhas all empty. Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the Prajna Paramita, perceives that all 5 skandhas are empty. Anyway, so this will not always be the case as we go through the rest of the Heart Sutra. So now I just want to go through some of these characters and look at them a little bit more. One thing I want to point out is when a character is actually something that you would encounter in ordinary, everyday spoken or written modern Mandarin and or Japanese, and that is indicated on these slides by showing you the HSK and the JLPT level. So, and these won't mean much to you if you haven't studied either Mandarin or Japanese, but you should just know that the lower the HSK level and the higher the JLPT level, the easier and more basic the word is. So the most basic words for Mandarin speakers are HSK level 1. The most basic kanji for Japanese speakers is N5. So this character, Heng, is actually quite common in Japanese. It's a little less common in modern Mandarin as a standalone character. Modern Mandarin tends to heavily emphasize 2 character combinations, which makes learning it a little bit more difficult. Okay, so the meaning of this character, and it comes up a lot in Buddhism. It means here's a Buddhist definition of this character from the online digital dictionary of Buddhism. Acts, deeds, or exercises aimed at taking one closer to the final goal of enlightenment. Or more generally, something that you engage in, or the act of engaging in something. In another source, not online, I think you might be able to get an online version of this through certain apps, but I just have it as a physical book. Paul Kroll's Dictionary of Classical and Medieval Chinese. Heng means formations of habitual action, so that's basically what this is saying up here. Acts, deeds, or exercises aimed at taking one closer to the final goal of enlightenment. That is, develop in kind of breaking that down a little bit, developing and cultivating good actions that will help you on your way to enlightenment. Good habits. Forming good habits is actually a very important concept in Buddhism. It's usually, well, at least it often isn't put in those terms, but just developing good habits is good Buddhism. All right. Now, one interesting place that this character shows up is in the Buddhist term for walking meditation. Walking meditation, which Western Buddhists are often familiar with walking meditation from the Japanese pronunciation, which is kin-hin. In Sino-Korean, it's gyongheng, and it actually means, so this is the character for sutra, which we've already covered, and practice. So sutra practice, somehow that means walking meditation. Turns out that this character that Buddhists use to mean sutra has a lot of different meanings in Chinese and in Japanese. One of the meanings, the reason why I have this picture here, is that it refers to the warp threads on a loom. So if you know anything about weaving, or if you're going to weave something, the first thing you got to do is set up your loom, and put the stationary warp threads, these threads that go up and down here that this person is now weaving on. Once the warp threads are there, that provides the structure that you weave on. It doesn't hang together by itself. It has to be physically attached to the loom. That's another meaning for this character, gyong, the warp threads on a loom. Yet another meaning, which is probably more related to walking meditation, is that this is a word for military formations or marching. Marching as in, so walking meditation, when we do walking meditation, if you've ever visited or practiced with or belong to a Zen meditation group, you've probably done walking meditation. It's marching meditation, actually, or at least that's one interpretation of it. The hang shows up in a couple of other places that are also on this slide. You can look at that later. I want to get through the rest of these. So now we've finally gotten to the point of the class where we get to talk about Savage Garden. And their song "Truly, Madly, Deeply." I have here this is the title in modern Mandarin of "Truly, Madly, Deeply," which it does not literally. It means deeply, madly, basically. So you take two characters for deep and put them together, it means very deep. And these are two different characters that both express different forms of being out of touch with reality. And put them together and they mean madly. Okay, so deeply, madly. The truly part didn't make it into the translation of the title into Mandarin. And here's the first verse in the chorus. If you look at these characters down here, if you know what to look for, you'll be able to see that these are actually in simplified Chinese characters, which are mostly the same as traditional Chinese characters. Okay, more traditional places to find this character are in the ox herding poems. It actually shows up a couple of different times, and I'm referring to usually people refer to the ox herding pictures, which is a very traditional Zen teaching that comes from the 12th century in China. Each of the ox herding pictures has a nice little poem that goes along with it. And this is two examples of poems that have the character for deeply or deep in it. Also in Kwanzaa Bosal chanting, which is a traditional chant from Korean Buddhism, we chant homage to universal gateway to the universal gateway manifestation, Avalokitesvara, the power of whose vows is wide and deep. That's the last character in that line when we chant Namu Bomun. Elizabeth knows this, but I can't remember the pronunciation of this now. But yeah, these are just places. It's also so HSK4 means that this is not a particularly basic character for Mandarin speakers, but it is something that by the time you were beginning junior high school, you would have learned this character if you were growing up speaking Chinese and going to school. A JLPT N3, that's about the same level for a Japanese kid who's going to school, would learn it by the time that they are entering or early on in junior high school. Oops. Now, she, character she, let's see, did I skip anything? No, that was deeply. Okay, she, we did hang, and then we did hang, shim, she. Yes, for time. Okay, so time, as I kind of mentioned before, if you're studying Mandarin or studying Chinese, this will be a character that you will learn early on. It shows up in these are Yebul is another traditional Buddhist chant. This is a reference to the time when the Buddha was teaching on Vulture Peak. So since it's referring to a specific time, it uses she as part of the way of referring to the time when the Buddha was teaching on Spirit Mountain, which is another name for Vulture Peak, which is the place where Shakyamuni Buddha taught the Lotus Sutra. Spirit Mountain is also the name of a very popular, not just in Mandarin, and this is a book that won, so the author won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and this novel was, his name is Gao Xingjian, and his book, Soul Mountain or Spirit Mountain, I don't think it has anything to, it actually does have a lot to do with Buddhism and Taoism and modern Chinese politics and a lot of interesting things. I haven't read it, but while I was looking for examples of character she, and then I was really fascinated by this phrase that shows up in this the Spirit Mountain. Anyway, um, this character also shows up. Oh, this is a very nice use of the word in another Buddhist poem. As soon as thought arises, this is true enlightenment. Samsara and nirvana are in complete harmony. This is a nice statement of Buddhist philosophy. It's just about as nice of a statement and poetically put as you are ever going to find. And as soon as thought arises, this is character first, arise, thought, when. Basically, the first four characters in this phrase are first, arise, thought, when. Jo-gyeon is a two-character combination. Now, this is a new character for this lesson. Gyeon, so Jo is the character for to illuminate. Gyeon is the character for to see or to meet. And when you put them together, it kind of makes a special way of seeing where you are not just seeing something, but your mind is illuminating it at the same time. And so in the Digital Dictionary of Buddhism, to shed light on, to observe clearly, to come to understand, or to take a view, to distinguish, to determine by seeing. So it's more active than just it's a much more active process involving the mind than simply seeing something. It means you see something, you understand it directly in seeing it, and at the same time you illuminate it with your mind, which is something that I guess Avalokitesvara can do. And in addition, in the not too surprisingly, in the Digital Dictionary of Buddhism, which so I okay. Anybody here ever looked up anything in the Digital Dictionary of Buddhism? Let me show you how you do that. It's real easy. You take a character, you copy it, you go to Google, and you enter the character, and then you say DDB. There's more than one thing that uses the acronym DDB on the internet. So you add Buddhism. If you do a Google search on any character followed by DDB and Buddhism, chances are the first hit will be the entry that you're looking for. And here by itself, this character means to, it gives you all the meanings of it. Then once you get a list of all these different things, then you can look for, if you want to look for a two-character combination, you can further refine the search just by searching in this page. Let's see. Now let's see. Do I find one where? Oh yeah, here it is. And here's the entry that I use. This is the entry for the two-character combination, Jo-gyeon. And I just copied and pasted this to create this PowerPoint slide. Okay, so that's real easy and is especially helpful if the Chinese characters that you are looking for are from the Heart Sutra. They're very likely they will have entries in the Digital Dictionary of Buddhism. Very, very likely. Okay. Back into presentation mode. All right. Oh, so now here's a few things that are just very interesting for not even so much Buddhist philosophy, but Chinese culture in general. We've learned in this lesson the character for 5, which is O, and the character for heng, character for action, which is heng. I told you that heng has a couple of different meanings. It is also when people speak of the 5 elements in so if you've ever had acupuncture, you may have had acupuncture from an acupuncturist who practices 5-element acupuncture, which is, well, I don't know. So anybody ever had acupuncture from a 5-element acupuncturist? Probably not. But Anybody here ever heard of reference to the 5 elements in Chinese philosophy? No? Okay. Well, so now you're really going to learn a little Chinese philosophy here. Uh, uh, Traditional Chinese philosophy has 5 elements, not 4, and they are actually we've covered most of these already, except for the first one, which will come in a later class. Wood, water, fire, and earth. We've covered all these characters so far. These are 4 of the 5 elements of traditional Chinese philosophy. And just for completeness, this is like a little poem in Chinese. Heaven has 5 stars: Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, Saturn. Earth has 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. And these planets correspond to these 5 elements. It's interesting that the planet that corresponds to the element of Earth is Saturn. The planet Earth doesn't feature as one of the stars in heaven because Earth is down here on Earth. Earth is where the 5 elements are. Also, another thing that comes in 5s is the 5 skandhas, which I think, is that the next slide? I think the next slide, yes, it is. But in a chant that I already referred to, and I'm teaching a separate class on that meets every other Tuesday night, is on the homage to the 3 jewels. And in that chant, we speak of the 5 fragrances, which are, if you take form, feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness, and purify them of all ignorance and delusion, then you have the 5 fragrances, which are Sila, Samadhi, Prajna, Moksha, and knowledge of moksha. And but let's go on to the 5 skandhas in their unpurified form. If you have the 5 skandhas and you have not gotten rid of delusions and all ignorance, then you just have the 5 skandhas, which are forms, feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. And guess what we're going to talk about in the next class? Form, feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. Actually, in the next, so this is lesson 4. In lesson 4, we introduce this one right here, hang, which is also, in addition to being action and practice and elements and stuff like that, it also means impulses in the 5 skandhas. Let's see. I think these 3 skandhas will be in the next class, and consciousness will probably be in the 6th class, which will be in 2 months. Anyway, skandha actually is a word that, or on, in Sino-Korean. This character does show up in modern spoken vernacular Mandarin Chinese. It isn't covered until the HSK 6 level. And so something that's at the HSK 6 level is very advanced for a non-native speaker, but it's still something that you would learn in high school if you are a native Mandarin speaker going to school. And so this is it's not the most common or basic of characters, but it's used. It is something that a native speaker of Chinese will know if they have a high school level education. And it means to accumulate, to hold and store, to contain, to gather together, to collect depth, inner strength, profundity. So it has a lot of meanings, even in just modern everyday Mandarin Chinese. If you've ever looked into the Buddhist meaning of this, you do know that the skandhas are sometimes referred to as the heaps, H-E-A-P, the heaps. And so they're kind of, or they're also referred to as the aggregates. And so a lot of these meanings in modern Chinese are actually not that, are kind of make sense in terms of the way that the word is used in Buddhism. And these are some other places where the word shows up, which I'm not going to spend any more time on. And now we come to the last 2 characters of this line and kind of revisiting them again, all empty. Now, in the next lesson, we will learn another very interesting two-character combination, ilche, which means everything. And when you combine ilche with gegong, then you get everything all empty. And this is considered one of the most basic teachings of Mahayana Buddhism. Everything is empty. Now, when you, if you're not a Buddhist, oh, let's see, somebody's chatting me. Oh, yeah, okay. Hana said that in Korean, the 5 elements are used for the days of the week. Is that what you said, Hana? Yeah. So in everyday, in people don't have to be talking about Buddhist philosophy or Taoist philosophy or ancient Chinese texts to refer to the 5 elements. They can just be talking about what day of the week it is, right? Okay, good. Of course, in English, when we use the days of the week, we're talking about Roman and German gods and goddesses. So it's not that strange to have a very ancient literature and ideas that are deeply embedded in such basic things as the days of the week. Um, in fact, it's interesting though. All in German, if you study German, uh, the days of the week are all Germanic gods, which most of the days of the week in English are. But in German, Wednesday is Mittwoch, which just means middle week. In ancient German, it was Odin's Day. But when the Germans converted to Christianity, Odin they didn't want people referring to Wednesday as Odin's Day, so they got rid of Odin's Day and made it middle week, as a sign that everybody was good Christians now and no longer worshipped Odin. They didn't want people even to say Odin's name, even when they were just saying what day of the week it was. Yeah. So, um, this concept that everything is all empty, you can't really talk about the Heart Sutra without talking about emptiness. And this isn't really, just as I've said this before, and I'll probably say it again, this isn't really a class on the Chinese language. I'm not a native speaker of Chinese. I don't have any really strong educational background in the Chinese language, and I'm not a language teacher. I've kind of taught myself these a little bit of the Chinese that's involved in the Heart Sutra, and this also isn't a class in Buddhist philosophy. And we're not going to dig deeply into the deep inner meaning of the Heart Sutra. I think before you can dig deeply into the deep meaning of the Heart Sutra, you got to know what the words mean. You got to know what the first pass is at just getting kind of the basic words. But when you're getting the first pass of what the basic meaning of the words are, and you come to find that the Heart Sutra is teaching that everything is empty, well, that's open to all kinds of interpretations, many of which are not really what the Buddha or Avalokitesvara had in mind when they taught the Heart Sutra. And so this quote from the Dalai Lama is a good, I think, antidote to some of the mistaken meanings that people have about emptiness or shunyata. So whenever we say empty or emptiness in a Buddhist context, we're using that to translate into English the Sanskrit word shunyata, and or we're using it to translate into English the Chinese word, which is pronounced in Korean as gong. And as I said before, this word also means sky or space. So there is a sense in which the sky or space are empty, but they're not nothing. And so anyway, the Dalai Lama here is basically saying, and this is pretty short, so I'll let people read that on their own time. But just to give a very, very quick summary of what he's saying is that if you get a little glimpse of what you think emptiness is, don't stop there. Don't say, "Aha, I've got it now." You have to work on it if you want to have any kind of a real true understanding of emptiness. And if you stop too early in your investigation of emptiness, then you're liable to just stop at thinking that it's nothing. Thich Nhat Hanh also had a lot to write, a lot to say. Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a, let me see, I'm going to ask for a show. Who here knows who Thich Nhat Hanh is? He was a Vietnamese Buddhist teacher. Yeah, and he had a lot to say about emptiness, and especially emptiness in the Heart Sutra. So he wrote a whole book on it. Actually, I think he wrote at least 2 books on this subject. And he actually said that the way the Heart Sutra was written by Xuanzang, when Xuanzang translated it into Chinese, wasn't quite right, which is a pretty audacious thing for any Buddhist teacher to say. So he came out with his own translation, which he called Translation of the Heart Sutra, first into Vietnamese, and then he translated the Vietnamese translation into English. And I think that what Thich Nhat Hanh has to say on this subject is very interesting, and very worth looking at and grappling with. And I mostly, and I shouldn't even say this, it's very arrogant of me to say this, but I mostly agree with Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh knows a lot more about Buddhism and the Heart Sutra and emptiness than I ever will. And he knows a lot more about Chinese than I will. When he was, even though he is part of a movement in Vietnamese Buddhism to make more use of the Vietnamese language and less use of Chinese, his training of Buddhism was all in Chinese. That's just the traditional, like in Korea, that's just a tradition in Vietnam. But he's been very active in wanting to translate sutras and the teachings of the Buddha and chants into Vietnamese. But he knows a lot more about Chinese than I ever will. And he basically, when he came out with his new translation of the Heart Sutra, it was actually a slight rewriting, a revision of the Heart Sutra. And he makes this very clear, even though he repeatedly refers to it as a translation, he also makes it clear that he's actually changing it a little bit. Because he doesn't want people to fall into a nihilistic view of things because of all this emphasis on emptiness, which is a reasonable concern, and that all the things that he says about it are very good. My teacher's teacher, Zen Master Sung San, who is a Korean Zen master, he was also very concerned about this. Let's see, I think I mentioned that on, is it on this slide here? I don't know, but Zen Master Sung San said that it's very important to. Oh yeah, here it is. Zen Master Sung San, oops, yeah, taught that however deep one's understanding of emptiness is, that one should never lose sight of what Sung San called correct function. And so he wrote one of the best books on his teaching is a little book called Dropping Ashes on the Buddha. And the title Dropping Ashes on the Buddha refers to a story about someone who has understood emptiness a little bit, but has come to the conclusion that you can do whatever you want. Since everything is empty, everything is nothing. And so this person just comes up into a Buddhist meditation center and is smoking a cigarette and takes a long drag on the cigarette and then flicks the ashes from his cigarette onto the Buddha statue on the altar. Because in his opinion, since everything is empty, there's no difference between a statue of the Buddha and an ashtray. And Zen Master Sung Sa would just teach, well, that's not correct function. And another way of saying that's not correct function is it's not very nice. If you understand emptiness, it doesn't turn you into a jerk who upsets other people. That's not a deep understanding of emptiness. Anyway, sorry to go off on a little tangent on Buddhist philosophy, but in the Heart Sutra, you have to deal with the concept of emptiness. That is the main thing in the Heart Sutra. Oh yeah, so these next two slides. Oh yeah, so I just want to wrap up by referring to someone who is an excellent source if you want to know more about Buddhism, if you want to know more about Avalokitesvara. Chung Fan Yu is a great writer, a great scholar, and she's written, she literally, so this is, let me just go to the last slide and then we're going to have to wrap it up pretty soon. She has literally written the book on Avalokitesvara, Kuan Yin, the Chinese transformation of Avalokitesvara. This is just a little quote from that book, which doesn't do it justice. I just want to put her in there because just as if you go anywhere deeper, since one of the characters that we're talking about this month is the character for deep. If you, what happened? Here we go. Here we go. If you look deeply into the Heart Sutra, and not even deeply, but just below the surface, two of the things that you have to grapple with are the Buddhist idea of shunyata, or emptiness, and the other is this person who's actually, so we've gotten to the name of Avalokitesvara, but when the Heart Sutra first begins, it's the Buddha who's speaking. After the second line, I think it's after the second line. We'll talk about this in the next class. It's Avalokitesvara who's speaking for the rest of the sutra. And so this is the book on Avalokitesvara, which is highly relevant to anybody who's interested in the Heart Sutra. And this is a nice little quote about Avalokitesvara is the Bodhisattva who listens, basically. Anyway, so I want to open it up for any questions. I do want to have us recite the Heart Sutra one more time before we leave each other. But does anyone have any questions? Or I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other a little bit better. Questions or comments at this point? One thing that I do plan to do is put out another video. I did for the first two classes. I made videos where I went through each character one at a time, went through the stroke order animation, which is a little tedious, but at the same time, I think it's very helpful, and I'm going to do that again. I didn't do it for the third class. I'm going to put out a video where I do all 60 characters that we covered in last month's class and this class. It'll be kind of a long and tedious video, but if you're going to learn how to write these characters, that's the kind of stuff you have to look at and study. And I'll also try to put in that I also want in that when I put out that video, which hopefully will be out in about a week, I want to go over again some stuff that I've talked about before, is how to study for this class, how to make practice sheets, how to use practice sheets, how to look up characters. I might have some more examples of looking up in the Cognate book, which is very good, but can be a little challenging to actually find. Why do I say it's good when it's hard to find the characters in it? Well, I don't know. I think it's worth. I think it's worth the effort because the information that it has. It's hard to find books on Chinese characters that give decent treatment to the Sino-Korean, to the Korean aspect of Chinese characters, and it's really hard to find a good book on Chinese characters that shows Japanese, Mandarin, and Korean side by side, which is really, really useful in my opinion. Anything else? Anything people want to ask or bring up or say? Okay. All right. So I'm going to, I gotta find the video now. It's right here. I don't have to search too far, which is a good thing. And I do want to thank everybody who came. Joe had to bow out early. I had talked to, he was here in the first part of the class, and but he had to leave. But it's really helpful for me to have people here to produce these videos live with people that are here live, and it's very useful to all the people who will come around later and see these videos who are saying, who want to learn the Heart Sutra, who want to learn what we're going over in this. It's actually not that easy to find. It's relatively easy to find lots of information about the Heart Sutra, but it's not that easy to find information on what we're doing here, which is going through it one character at a time, and how to write the characters, what the characters mean, and how it all adds up to the Heart Sutra. And I don't know why that is. One of the reasons for it is because people get off on tangents. They start talking about the Heart Sutra. Before you know it, they've written a whole book on emptiness, and they haven't explained. They haven't really gone through the whole Heart Sutra, or they've developed a theory about the Heart Sutra, and they write a whole book about their theory about the Heart Sutra, and which can be very interesting, but isn't necessarily what what they should be doing, in my opinion. Lots of people have theories about the Heart Sutra. Okay. So now I've got the video up, but you can't see it because I forgot to share my screen. Sorry. Okay, thanks again, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you in a month. I'll say goodbye again at the end of the chanting, and everyone can also say goodbye. Forgot to unmute. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.